Hello all and welcome to Miss Martin's Classroom. Today's podcast will be featuring an incredible young adult novel that portrays the tumultuous and oppressive history of Afghanistan through the eyes of two women. Fans of realistic fiction like Dear Martin may enjoy this fearlessly written novel. As a disclaimer, I want to say that this book contains mature content related to violence. That being said, this mature content is portrayed to realistically illuminate the events and culture surrounding Afghanistan and our two female protagonists during that time period. The author artfully and engagingly alternates the perspectives of each woman in the different chapters. This realistic fiction novel illustrates the struggle of two heroic women as they tried to survive this oppressive and sexist society. Miriam is a child born out of wedlock. She and her mother were banished by her wealthy businessman father due to the shame of her birth. During this time, bastard children in Afghanistan were seen as shameful and illegitimate. After her mother's death, 15-year-old Miriam is sold to Rashid, a 40-ish shoemaker in Kabul, hundreds of miles away from Miriam's home. Rashid holds to strictly conventional beliefs and forces Miriam to wear a burqa, even though women in 1974 Kabul have the freedom to be uncovered. Miriam soon realizes that her new husband has rigid expectations for her and will mete out very unpleasant and very painful consequences should she not deliver. April 1978. On the radio, a woman's voice was saying that the Taraki, the leader of the Kalk branch of the PDPA, the Afghan Communist Party, was in the streets giving rousing speeches to demonstrators. "What do they want?" Miriam asked. "These communists. What is it that they believe?" Rashid chortled and shook his head, but Miriam thought she saw uncertainty in the way he crossed his arms, the way his eyes shifted. "You know nothing, do you? You're like a child. Your brain is empty. There is no information in it." "I ask because—" "Shepko! Shut up!" It wasn't easy tolerating him talking this way to her, to bear his scorn, his ridicule, his insults, his walking past her like she was nothing but a house cat. But after 4 years of marriage, Miriam saw clearly how much a woman could tolerate when she was afraid. And Miriam was afraid. She lived in fear of his shifting moods, his volatile temperament, his insistence on steering even mundane exchanges down a confrontational path. A path that, on occasion, he would resolve with punches, slaps, kicks, and sometimes try to make amends for with polluted apologies, and sometimes not. Now Miriam dreaded the sound of him coming home in the evening. The key rattling, the creak of the door, these were sounds that set her heart racing. From her bed she listened to the click-clack of his heels, to the muffled shuffling of his feet after he'd shed his shoes. With her ears she took inventory of his doings. Chair legs dragged across the floor, the plaintive squeak of the cane seat when he sat, the clinking of spoon against plate, the flutter of newspaper pages flipped, the slurping of water. As her heart pounded, her mind wondered what excuse he would use that night to pounce on her. There was always something, some minor thing that would infuriate him, because no matter what she did to please him, no matter how thoroughly she submitted to his wants and demands, it wasn't enough. She could not give him his son back. In his most essential way, she had failed him. 7 times she had failed him. And now she was nothing. Rashid made a ball of rice with his fingers. He put it in his mouth, chewed once, then twice, before grimacing and spitting it out on the sofa. "What's the matter?" Miriam asked, hating the apologetic tone of her voice. She could feel her pulse quickening, her skin shrinking. "What's the matter?" he mewed, mimicking her. "What's the matter is that you've done it again." "But I boiled it 5 minutes more than usual." "That's a bold lie." I swear." He shook the rice angrily from his fingers and pushed the plate away, spilling sauce and rice on the sofa. Miriam watched as he stormed out of the living room, then out of the house, slamming the door on his way out. Miriam kneeled to the ground and tried to pick up the grains of rice and put them back on the plate, but her hands were shaking badly, and she had to wait for them to stop. Dread pressed down on her stomach. She tried taking a few deep breaths. She caught her pale reflection in the darkened living room window and looked away. Then she heard the front door opening and Rashid was back in the living room. "Get up," he said. "Come here, get up. He snatched her hand, opened it, and dropped a handful of pebbles into it. "Put these in your mouth." "Stop it, Rashid, His powerful hands clasped her jaw. He shoved 2 fingers into her mouth and pried it open, then forced the cold, hard pebbles into it. Miriam struggled against him, mumbling, but he kept pushing the pebbles in. His upper lip curled in a sneer. "Now, chew," he said. Through the mouthful of grit and pebbles, Miriam mumbled a plea. Tears were leaking out of the corners of her eyes. "Chew!" A gust of his smoky breath slammed against her face. Miriam chewed. Something in the back of her mouth cracked. "Good," Rashid said. His lips were quivering. "Now you know what your rice tastes like. Now you know what you've given me in this marriage. Bad food and nothing else." Then he was gone, leaving Miriam to spit out pebbles, blood, and the fragments of 2 broken molars. In 1987 Afghanistan, we meet 9-year-old Layla, her parents, and her friend Tariq. Layla lives during the 8th year that Afghanistan was occupied by Soviet Russia. The presence of Russia was bad for Afghanistan, but good for women, as they were given more freedoms than ever before. However, Kabul truly suffers in 1992 as the Soviets leave Afghanistan and rival warlords destroy the city. Tariq leaves for Pakistan, leaving Layla heartbroken and pregnant. Every night after dinner, Bobby helped Layla with her homework and gave her some of his own. This was only to keep Layla a step or 2 ahead of her class, not because he disapproved of the work assigned by the school, the propaganda teaching notwithstanding. In fact, Bobby thought that the one thing that the communists had done right, or at least intended to, ironically, was in the field of education, the vocation from which they had fired him. More specifically, the education of women. The government had sponsored literacy classes for all women. Almost 2/3 of the students at Kabul University were women now. Bobby said women who were studying law, medicine, engineering. "Women have always had it hard in this country, Layla. But they're probably more free now, under the communists, and have more rights than they've ever had before," Bobby said, always lowering his voice, aware of how intolerant Mammy was of even remotely positively talking about the communists. "But it's true," Bobby said. "It's a good time to be a woman in Afghanistan, and you can take advantage of that, Layla. Of course, women's freedom," here he shook his head ruefully, "is also one of the reasons people out there took up arms in the first place." By "out there," he didn't mean Kabul, which had always been relatively liberal and progressive. Here in Kabul, women taught at the university, ran schools, held office in the government. No, Bobby meant the tribal areas, especially the Pashtun regions in the south or in the east near the Pakistani border, where women were rarely seen on the streets, and only then in burqa and accompanied by men. He meant those regions where men who lived by ancient tribal laws had rebelled against the communists and their decrees to liberate women, to abolish forced marriage, to raise the minimum marriage age to 16 for girls. There, men saw it as an insult to their centuries-old tradition, Bobby said, to be told by the government, and a godless one at that their daughters had to leave home, attend school, and work alongside men. "God forbid that should happen," Bobby liked to say sarcastically. Then he would sigh and say, "Layla, my love, the only enemy an Afghan cannot defeat is himself." Bobby took his seat at the table, dipped bread into his bowl of ash. Layla decided that she would tell him about what Tariq had done to Kadim over the meal before they started in on fractions. But she never got the chance, because right then there was a knock at the door, and on the other side of the door, a stranger with news. One day, Layla finds herself in desperate need of shelter and stumbles upon Farid and Miriam. However, as Farid seeks to make Layla his next young wife, Miriam cannot help but see Layla as someone she must protect. Khaled Hosseini fearlessly weaves a tale of sorrow and grim determination as the 2 women's stories intertwine in 1,000 Splendid Suns. This is truly a novel you can simply sink your teeth into. Don't forget to like and subscribe below. Also, check out my hashtag MSMReadyToRead and follow me on Instagram at ms_martins_class for more new books and fun lessons that are sure to engage you and your kiddos. Be sure to tune in next week for my next Book Talk Tuesday podcast and comment your thoughts below if you have read this book or another book by the author. Thanks for watching!